All right, we're now recording. Rich, you want to just officially call to order again?
Yeah, we called the meeting to order at 7:03. We failed to start recording right away, so we're going to kind of start back over. First item was the expenditures for the current year budget. That's the first or the second item on the agenda, so that's what we're discussing right now. And basically, First Selectman Don Stein had just gone through it to let us know that we're pretty much on target for where we need to be this time of year. With one exception, which is legal, which we've been aware of for the last few months, that our legal is over because of some pending litigation. You have more on that, Don?
Well, I was just opening it to questions at that point.
Yep.
So what's driving the surplus you mentioned?
Terry, are you there? Did Terry sign on?
I saw her name up there.
I don't see her anywhere. To answer your question, Sal, it's the normal, we budgeted 98% for collection rate. And we typically tend to exceed that collection rate. And then, she's had some pretty good luck collecting past due taxes. So we budget conservatively and we tend to end up with a surplus in the overall collections between current year and previous years. Along, because when you collect on the previous years, you also collect on the penalty assessed for people. Does that answer your question okay?
Yeah, that was Dave's question.
Or was that Dave? I thought it was, no, I'm sorry.
Yep, thank you.
And
Any,
the other part of that is at this point in the year, we're, each month brings in very modest increases in the collections because most of the people have already paid. Sometimes if a house sells and they've been in arrears, we'll get a little bonus, but typically it's $10,000 or $20,000 a month at this time of year.
So anything further on the current year expenditures? The next 4 or 5 items on the agenda are all budget related. I'm hoping we can get Terry on the line. I think it would be a good idea to get a little background from her on tax collections, and if she can't be on, maybe Don, you can elaborate on in previous years where we've had issues where we I thought it would be difficult for people to pay. How was our collection rate and stuff? I think that's important to discuss before we discuss the regular items in the budget. Otherwise, we got to go back over that.
Terry's in the waiting room. She'll be here momentarily.
Okay.
Did you want to skip over the specific budgets and talk about the revenues and stuff like that, Rich?
Well, I wanted to go over the specific budgets in case there's any additional comments, questions, or, but I thought it would be better, and actually David called me earlier today and suggested that we have the discussion on the taxes before we do that, because that would have an impact on what we might do with other budgets.
Let me get down to the sheet that we put together that summarizes things.
Oh, there's Terry.
Come on, Terry.
I'm on. I apparently have no audio on my computer.
Okay, we were looking for any research you've done on previously, how we've done on tax collections and suggestions on mill rates and stuff. I know you've done a lot of research over the last few days.
I'm trying to find a sheet that I summarized, and I thought I'd put it in the package. So if you excuse me, I'm scrolling through it right now.
Did you put this year's collections in there? I don't remember.
Now, I didn't put this year's collections, but I put the summary about your expectations on, here it is. I think this was Dave's question from the last meeting when we look back over the last, at least the last year. We didn't go all the way back to 2008, 2009. But this year, what I mentioned, Terry, and I think it was accurate based on the discussion with you, was that you expect about $135,000 surplus this year, more or less.
That's what we have now, and I think we'll probably be up closer to 150,000, maybe even more. I think 150 is conservative.
But what I put together here, and this was based on some information from Terry, is and this has to do with going forward. If you look at the coming fiscal year, last year we collected $5.7 million, July, August, and September.
Right.
And this fiscal year we collected $6.1 million in the same 3 months. If you look at escrow, we estimate that the escrow payments will be about $2 million, and that's, Terry had done that research.
That's correct.
The general fund undesignated surplus at the start of this fiscal year was 1.386 million, 1.387 million. If you look at the expenditures last year from July to September, we spent about $3.6 million. So if you take the surplus plus the escrow, that's $3.4 million. So we're only shy by a couple of $100,000 if we collect no taxes at all. The expectation is that we'll collect 2/3 or so. Some people will take advantage of a deferment or be willing to pay the 3%. But in general, I think a lot of people pay the full year's taxes in July because they want to pay it while they have the money. So if we collected, let's say, $2.5 to $3 million, our cash flow would still be okay with a deferment. And, we'll talk more about that when we come to that agenda item. But right now, I think as far as looking forward, we're probably in as good a shape as we can be with all the unknowns out there. I don't think there's any way to predict
So,
what
Terry,
we'll lose, but by deferring, we have a better sense of when we'll collect the money.
Terry, what's your
Yes.
recollection of the recession back in 2008-9? Remember what the collection rate was back then?
I went back and looked, and there was virtually no change in it. It stayed steady. I did like 5 or 6 years and covered 2008 and 2009, and everything stayed exactly the same.
Okay.
I mean, you guys had mentioned reducing the collection rate, and I mean, I don't have a problem putting it back to 97. I think that, might be a good idea based on the unknowns that we have. I mean, at this point, I don't know a lot of people that are out of work, but I don't know if other people know a lot of people that are out. I mean, I know just a handful that aren't working.
Well, Terry, across the board, I think this crisis has impacted more people than the 2008, 2009. So that might not be a bad idea.
I mean, I don't know. Pretty much everybody I know is still working. They're just working from home.
I think there are people who've taken some cuts in pay and some furloughs and things like that, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're out there, but I just haven't found a whole bunch of them.
I think currently as the revenue sheet sits, what we approved last month, we were at the 97% collection rate. So I think we're good on that probably.
Right, and if you stayed at 90, I looked at that revenue sheet. I mean, you stayed at 97% and kept the mill rate pretty much right where it was. So, I mean, I think that certainly would work.
Terry, Dave asked a question before you got on about the surplus, and I said it's, normally that we do exceed the current year collections because we get better than 98%. And also, you've had some good collections on past years with the penalties, et cetera. Would you say that was accurate?
Yes.
Combination of the two?
Yep.
One more question for you, Terry. What about the line item for prior years? You know, the 85,000 or whatever that line is?
Yes.
What do you think about that line item?
We've been doing very good with that the last few years. I mean, I have one account now that's up there that, although that'll get paid in this fiscal year. He thinks it'll get paid in this fiscal year. If it doesn't, it'll get paid the beginning of next year, and that'll be a good start. We seem to be doing good with that. And obviously I'll keep pursuing it and trying to work with people and
So
hopefully.
leave it alone?
I'm sorry?
You're recommending leave it alone?
Yes, I would say leave it alone.
I have a question. Steve Egbertson here.
Yep.
I go along with the idea of staying where we are. I think that's probably pretty good, but I just wonder what would be the plan B if the tax collections did precipitously drop? What would we do? I mean, how would we proceed?
Steve, I can answer that.
Yeah.
Every year at the town meeting, there's a line item, and it got changed a little bit a couple of years ago, but every year we put a line item in there that authorizes the Board of Selectmen with concurrence of the Board of Finance, the short-term borrow in the event that we have a cash flow.
Well, that's good. Thanks a lot, Don. I appreciate that.
The expectation is we'd have to do that. It would be very, but that's the only option. So one of the things probably after tonight or after we set a budget is starting a dialogue with Webster Bank, who's our banker, one of the local banks, just to make sure that we would be okay if we needed to borrow.
Okay, good.
Don.
Thanks.
Hey, Don, isn't your sheet here on the screen showing that if we lose a third of the tax revenue, we'll still be okay based on our current revenue?
Yeah, what I'm showing there is we started this fiscal year with a undesignated surplus of $1.386 million. Normally we spend $3.5 million, $3.6 million during these 3 months. So if you take the $2 million worth of escrow and you take the undesignated surplus, that's $3.386 million. So the shortfall, if we collected zero taxes, is only $200,000. So during that time, if we collected $2 to $3, $4 million, we would still be good for several months and hopefully would catch up. So I don't see a cash flow problem during that 3-month period, even with a deferral.
Right, so that answers Steve's question too, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'd be a couple $100,000 shy if we got zero in taxes.
I don't think that's going to happen, though.
I don't think
Might
it's
go
gonna-
down, but not that much.
And my other question was the ECS money and that, when do we start getting that? Do we get that before October 1st?
It comes, we do get it before October 1st. I think there's a payment typically in the summer, one early winter and one about now.
All right, I think we'll move along with the agenda items now. We're gonna cover this a little more when we get to the revenue sheet. So the next item on the agenda would be the capital projects. Probably is not gonna be a whole lot to discuss on that because last month we decided that we weren't gonna do any capital projects for this year. The only thing that was up in the air, and I'll kick this over to Jim from the school. There was some question on the cleaning of the ductwork in the school, whether that had to be done this coming fiscal year or whether that could be put off. So are you on there, Jim?
I am here, and I don't have an answer to that yet, Richard. I would suspect, though, that we could put that off.
So what I'll do is I'll take this sheet before the budget hearing and I'll just move everything to the right, at least for accounting purposes for this year.
Anybody else have any questions or comments on the capital projects?
Not me.
If not, the next item on the agenda would be the Board of Education budget. So, Jim, are there any changes on that?
No changes at this time, Rich. We're still in negotiations with Legit regarding bus services and this time when we're out. But I don't have an answer yet on those costs. Typically around the area, school districts, as you know, are required to fund payrolls for drivers. Most districts are paying or in negotiations at about 80% of their normal costs. Bruce and I just hung up the phone about 15 minutes before this meeting started, and we're still not ready to commit, either one of us, to what's an appropriate payment for the end of the year, or for the days, I should say, that we're out until May 20th.
Rich, a quick question for Jim from Matt Kelly. Last meeting, there was one of the capital projects that we were going to see if it was going to be a mandated item.
Yeah, Matt, that was the vent cleaning, and I don't have an answer for that yet, but I suspect that we will be able to put that off for another year.
Why is she so out of control?
Dude, she's insane, seriously.
Also, we just had a chimney inspection done on our older boiler.
We're trying to say that the school doesn't need their,
Do whoever's talking mute themselves?
No, they absolutely do. Every year it should be.
Can somebody mute themselves who's talking in the background? Try again, Jim.
It looks like it's Jill. Hey, Jill.
I'm going to mute everybody. Now, if you need to talk, unmute yourself. So Jim, go ahead.
So I think we could put off the vent cleaning for a year. But we just had a chimney inspection on the front boiler in the front part of the building. And they found significant cracks in the lining there. So I need to spend about $6,500 this summer unexpectedly to have a liner put in that chimney, and we'll figure it out of our regular operating budget at this point.
Yeah, that doesn't qualify for capital anyway, based on
No, I know.
the $10,000 threshold.
Yeah.
Hey, Don, Rob Brainerd here. In our last capital budget meeting, we had mentioned there was a surplus, or we had additional monies in that. Is that going to be maintained for next year, or is that going to somehow fall back into the town if we have a shortfall?
I think that's a question for the Board of Finance, what they'd like to do with it.
That's money coming back.
That's about $120,000, $125,000.
And that's money coming back on the probably fuel tank?
Correct.
Yeah, we haven't really discussed that since the money hasn't come back yet, but typically that would go back into the capital account. But once again, that'll be up to the board when that time comes.
Yeah, it would be, normally it'd be on a town meeting agenda, either to transfer it back to the undesignated capital fund or the undesignated general fund. The other thing Rich and I talked about briefly is if an unexpected capital project like that event comes along, we can also have a special town meeting to authorize it later, especially if we do have that surplus available to us. But that, again, that's a Board of Finance decision.
Jim, you have any other update on how you're making out with the overage this year from the special ed cost?
No, that's still an open number, Rich. And one of the reasons is that when the closure came to be, we had anticipated some significant savings in student transportation for special needs. And then since then, the governor's executive order mandated that we have to make those payrolls regardless of what the busing situation is to the transportation companies. And so some of that money that I was anticipating as a surplus suddenly evaporated. I'm not in a place right now where I can predict where we're going to end up. We're trying to save every penny that we can between now and the end of the year. I'm hopeful that we will be as close to zero as possible and not be running a deficit by the time the end of the year comes, but that remains to be seen.
Well, thank you for your dedication on that.
Yep.
Does the board members have any questions or comments on the Board of Education budget at this point? If not, we'll move on to the general government budget. That would be you, Don. Where you're at with
Jim?
that.
Jim?
Sorry, yes?
Yes, Sal here. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. So we talked a little bit last time about the Board of Education budget and the increase. And you'd mentioned that it was in the high school budget. It wasn't our budget, but it wasn't our budget. So what I'd like to do is memorialize this increase. And when this changes, I want to be absolutely sure that those funds are not redistributed through the budget as they were last time.
Yeah.
So you got this increase. So hear me out.
Let me make sure I understand you correctly, Sal. In other words, I think what you're saying is that, let's say I have a special needs, special cost of, just round numbers, $100,000 this year. And so that's budgeted for. And then the following year, that student moves out of district or those services are no longer needed. Would we reduce our budget by $100,000? Is that what you're saying?
That those dollars would be a direct savings to the town.
They always are. That's that you can't re-spend money in different areas.
No, they're not because the last time we had savings, the budget would have gone down by, I think it was 2.75%, and the budget came in about 1% over, and everybody was high-fiving, and we went ahead and spent the money. It was redistributed.
That's actually not true. We actually returned 140. We returned 140,000.
Stop interrupting first. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
Oh,
so we can go ahead and
we should probably see some evidence of that, just so we can understand what you're talking about, just some visuals, so we can understand what numbers we're looking at.
All right, then maybe we should hold the budget up and a vote on the budget until we do that.
But I don't think that the Board of Ed budget, we can't re-spend money in different areas. We have to spend what's budgeted, and then we can't spend over that. Are you talking about like at the end of the year when they do the account transitions to zero everything out? Is that what you're referring to?
No, what I'm talking about is we had a savings from that account line. The monies that were saved in that current year budget indirectly were redistributed to other accounts. So rather than have a savings that year, the money was spent.
We've returned hundreds of thousands the past couple of years. I'm not really sure how you're coming up with that.
We didn't.
All right, show it to us, because we gave 140-something thousand back the past 2 years. Absolutely, we did.
Don, if I
Rob,
can jump in for a second,
Rob,
this is Tom Brednitz.
Rob, you weren't on the board then when this occurred.
2 years ago? Last year he's talking about.
Occurred about 4 years ago.
Don, Dave,
Go ahead,
Sal,
Tom.
do you mind if I jump in for a second?
You're the chairman. Go ahead.
This is Tom Brednitsky. Sal, I believe that this question that you brought up came up at the last budget meeting. And I appreciated Jim's response and intent was to do exactly what you were outlining, that money wouldn't be reallocated. And I think that's what you're referring back to when we discussed this at the last meeting. And I can tell you that from my interpretation, I'm telling you here, that's the intent, that money would be, wouldn't be reallocated for, what was allocated for special needs or special ed services, that we wouldn't go back the following year and ask for that money back to redistribute in other areas.
And I know this is being taped, but can we reflect that in the Board of Finance minutes, please? That specifically?
I think that's what we discussed at the last meeting, and Jim, that's what my interpretation was. That's what my feeling is. So,
As I have said, several times, we're not going to do that. When we have leftover money at the end of the year because of something, a student moves out of district or something like that, we're not going to take the unspent money and spend it wantonly on any other projects or anything else.
But Jim, Sal's not talking about money left over at the end of the year. He's talking about budgeting. He's saying that if next year, let's say next year, the student moves out of town, you now have $100,000 available that you didn't have before. Sal is saying, don't budget that money towards computers and books and whatever else.
Absolutely, Dave.
That
will never happen under my watch, okay? That will never happen under my watch. We budget, we like to do budgeting like from a zero-based budgeting process, okay? If the needs for, in this case, special education is X, that's what I'm going to budget for. What I know today when we're budgeting for it, okay? I'm not going to keep that line item flat if suddenly that child is not with us anymore, or if that expense, whatever it is, whatever line item it is, we're not going to just roll it forward and say this is what we need because we had it last year. We go back to zero every year.
And I would concur, especially when you look at the special ed, that is such a variable year over year, that it isn't one that I would say it's fluid every year when we look at it. You can see that from last year to this year, from 2 years ago to this year with the special ed numbers. So Sal, I think in sentiment and intent, I think what you're saying, Jim is in agreement with, I'm in agreement with, as far as moving forward into the, through this year and looking back at this number for next year, if that special ed, the student population changes, and then that number will change. If that student ages out or moves out of district, in theory, that number would go down versus stay flat or at whatever this year's budget carries.
Absolutely.
So I'm in agreement.
Right. That's a key point. But the other key point is, even though the special ed line goes down, that doesn't mean you then put more money into other lines.
No.
We've never done that.
I look at
the
the special ed lines are somewhat separate in a year over year sense than the overall budget number.
And in years past, we've actually, at the end of the year, if you look at the budget that Jim presented in the presentation, we show money that's been given back every year on line items not spent. I remember 2 or 3 years ago, we had a significant drop mid-year on some special education costs, and that went back into the town because we can't keep money. We actually have to give everything back at the end of the year. But as Tom and Jim have said, that number is fluid by the day, and we can get 3 people that roll in tomorrow or 3 people that leave tomorrow. It's an unknown, and we budget as best we can at the time we're presented with who's going to be in school.
Okay, all right. I think at this point we all seem to be in agreement. Matt, can you put something in the minutes?
If I just mention one thing, this is Caprice Board of Ed. One thing I would like Jim to explain too is that there is a state reimbursement 40% of, well, Jim, you can probably explain this more than I can, but there will be money that comes back from the state for the special ed budget and that nobody's talking about. So even though it's in the budget for these special ed students, we should also reflect that there will be compensation from the state that comes back for special ed. And Jim, please explain it a little bit more in detail, because we're not talking about that. And I think that needs to be clear in this budget.
Glad to do that, Caprice. With special services, there's something called the excess cost grant. The excess cost grant basically, in essence, says that once a child's expenditures exceed 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure for students in general, the state will reimburse 70% of the overage of the 4.5 times the per pupil expenditure. So typically, and that's not something that comes through the Board of Education budget, that gets credited directly to the town. So for instance, if you have a student that is, I'm making these numbers up on the fly here, but if you have a per pupil expenditure of $20,000, let's say, in a school district, that would mean that $90,000, once a child's cost exceeds $90,000, it's reimbursable. So if the child's expense is $160,000, that would mean $70,000. 70% of that $70,000 would be reimbursable to the town. But again,
Jim, this is Jim. This is John. It just as a matter of interest, is that federal idea money that does that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And for Sal, for the minutes, you're just looking for something that says, the budget year to year is not utilizing special ed student money if that student leaves town to keep the budget flat.
But that sounds fine, thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Jim, thanks for the explanation.
No problem. My pleasure.
And I did
Anything
realize it was a different administration at that time, so.
All right, anything else on the Board of Ed budget? If not, we'll move on to,
You need a motion to put it forward to the public hearing?
I thought we did that last month. We're just following up this month in case we want to make any changes.
Okay.
Am I correct on that?
I just gotta look
Check
at my
the
minutes.
What's the minutes say?
Looking them up now.
Oh. I guess I didn't put them in the packet. My error, sorry.
That's why I can't find them.
You want me to bring them up real quick?
Yeah, if you've got them right there.
Yeah, I can look them up on the website. I thought I'd put them in the package, but I guess I neglected that. That meeting was March 26th?
That sounds correct.
Okay.
Don, I have them. We did forward it on.
Okay, I just brought them up.
Yep, but we did forward them on to the public hearing.
Yep. forward that to a public hearing. And I think you forwarded on what projects that would have been done.
Yep,
And you forwarded the general government budget also.
we did.
Okay, let me go back to the package then. I apologize for that.
Don, would it be possible for you to email that to everybody while we're in the meeting so that when we get to that on the agenda, they've got them to look at?
I'll bring them up on this. Oh, yeah, but you're saying there's people who are, yeah, that might take a second. Hold on.
Well, you can bring them up later if you want. I just want to make sure we have them available when it comes time to vote on them.
Yeah, if you give me, all right. They're available. I can put them on the screen, but I know there's people on the phone here, so is there anybody so John Doyle and Sal are not viewing the screen, right? Anybody else on the Board of Finance who's not on the video?
Yeah,
George,
so Don, this is John. I can follow it. Don't worry about it.
Okay, and Sal, I think you're the only other one. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah,
George, I don't think is.
I do have the documents that you sent on my iPad.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see everything that you're showing, Don, on the screen. I can see
Let me
everything.
I'll do this. This will take just a second if you bear with me. Okay, I just sent it to the whole Board of Finance. All right, let's see, where do we need to be here?
General government.
Yeah. I'm going back to the main package again. So the last meeting, we were showing a 1.8% increase in the general government budget. There were some reductions in debt service. Basically, we talked about at the selectmen meeting, and we really did not come up with anything of substance. We did not want to change the road plan, because if you don't manage the roads, the safety, the road decay just gets worse faster. So basically, we came back with the same budget. The only thing we had discussed, and it was in the Waterbury paper because we did have a report at the meeting, was the possibility of doing 0% increases like was done back in 2009, I think it was. And I talked to Jim and I talked to our union folks, and the feeling was that would be a hard sell with union contracts and the like, because the people are not working any less. I know the teachers are working extremely hard on the virtual learning. The highway department is doing all their normal activities. People are working from home. So we didn't see any reduction in workload. So the recommendation was we came back with the same, basic budget that you approved at the last meeting of a 1.89% increase.
We have comments or questions from the board?
I have one thing to keep in mind with that. I know, they don't want to do pay cuts to anybody, but a lot of people that are still working from home and stuff, there is a lot of people that they have suffered pay cuts and stuff. And I think, everybody's going to be suffering here one way or another. It might be something to think about, to pass that along, help everybody out here. We don't know how long this thing is going to go for. It could go way on. I just read an article today. It said that the second coronavirus could be worse this winter. So, this ain't going to be over here in the summer. There's more to come. So, just something to think about.
If we got to that point, George, my discussion with Rich Novak I guess at this point, I would think about laying somebody off or furloughing somebody at that point, rather than doing an across the board pay cut. We also got back, as part of the negotiation, an increase in the deductible on the insurance, which gave us a reduction in the insurance premiums, both for ourselves and an increase in the cost to the, it was a smaller increase than it would have been if they had stayed at the same deductible. So we did get something back in return for the pay increase. It wasn't just solely a pay increase. But if at the point we had the kind of situation you're talking about, and I'm not doubting that that's a good possibility, we would look at staffing, I think, rather than doing an across the board cut.
Hey, Don, Sal here. I'm not going to point out any particular group or person or level, but, to say that nothing has changed and everybody's doing the same thing, and that cannot be the case right across the board. I understand the teachers, but I'm sure the math teacher's doing a little more than, the physical ed teacher that, is maybe taking a ride on their bicycle and YouTubing it back to the kids, or, an art project, or, again, not to point the finger at any one area, any one part of the budget, but, straight across the board, there's far more people working less from home than there are working the same or more from home. And it's unfortunate that we don't have any ability to get a clearer picture where that they wouldn't step up. But it just seems that there should be some savings somewhere. I just feel it's important to get that out.
Okay, and I won't comment on the Board of Education and the teachers. That is, I have no control over that, and I think Jim knows that best. What I was talking about specifically was the few employees who work for the highway department, the 5 people there, and the 5 full-time people and part-time people in the town hall. The part-time people are not working right now because we only have the office managers, the tax collector, the assessor, they're working full-time from home, sometimes in town hall. So I was only referring to the town hall or the town employees, Sal. As far as the school, I know every teacher I know, when I've talked to Jim, the teachers are working more hours than they do when school's in regular session because of the learning curve they're on with the virtual learning and preparing for the next day. That's universal from anybody I know who's a teacher or anybody who's married to a teacher.
I would echo that also, Sal. I'm seeing it firsthand. Administratively, there are myself, Kristen, Erica, curriculum coordinator, that are overseeing a lot of this. And I could tell you, we haven't taken a break since the closure occurred. And I'm talking about straight through the weekends. It's been a real uphill climb. Our teachers stepped up to the plate like I have never seen before in any district I've ever worked. We didn't miss a day. We had kids on the following Monday getting direct instruction, face-to-face meeting time with teachers. That's only just now beginning to happen in most of the districts around us. And it's taken incredible amounts of time. I sit here at my dining room table. My wife is at the other end of the table. She's a paraprofessional in another district, and I'm watching her help some of the students that she needs to help. And we're clocking hours that you just can't imagine because of the difficulties in the format here. I couldn't in good conscience ever do anything with teachers or the paraprofessionals in our district. They're really a class act this year, I'll tell you. Every year, but this year in particular.
I don't disagree. I totally agree. I think they're a class act. I just can't understand how, and maybe you can explain, take a typical class, I don't know, math class, English class. Teachers are not in a classroom teaching. So from what I understand, there's there are notes to be covered and, by parents, as far as whatever that curriculum is, requires. And they plan out their week and that's sent home. And I'm hearing from a lot of parents that it's almost a full-time job, basically homeschooling their kid with information that's sent by the school. So I just, listen, I'm not saying cut anybody. I just couldn't let those comments pass where, everything's exactly the same and we're all working, overtime at home. And frankly, I just don't believe it. So if you can prove to me, and it's not incumbent upon you to do that, Jim.
Yeah.
You walk me through a class. This is what we're doing in history. This is what we're doing in math. This is what it just doesn't add up. And that goes for the administrators as well. I just think that they're doing less, and I'm not knocking them for it. I just don't think it requires as much. And I'm not in education, so maybe that's part of the problem.
I'm not in education either, and everybody I know who's in education is talking about this being more difficult because they're dealing with kids one-on-one, they're dealing with classroom situations through virtual media, they're preparing lessons that very differently than they had before. Every teacher I know of or every teacher I've talked to says this is longer hours than the normal classroom day, normal classroom approach.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that, Sal. So this is one of those times where I think we're going to have to agree to disagree.
Yeah, but I think you guys also have to think about there's, for the people in the town, everybody is suffering one way or another. And at what point is the government going to suffer a little bit too? I know teachers we're people, everybody has a job, but, everybody has to toe the line a little bit here and suck it up a little bit. We're all working a little bit harder and some people aren't working at all, but the few people that are still working, they're working harder, whether in a private business or whether they're in government. But, the government also has to take a hit a little bit too, sometimes.
Yeah, I think I agree with George that at least I'm not questioning what the what the education teachers are doing and their workload. I'm not questioning that. I'm on the same page with George in that this always comes down to a public versus private sector. Whenever there's a issue with our economy, something goes bad, the private sector, we lose our jobs or we make cuts in salary, and the public sector expects to skate through free. And that's the way it always is, and we're not going to change it tonight.
Then maybe we can get on with our meeting, please.
Spoken like a true educator.
Except that Steve was not an educator.
Oh, man.
All right. Anything else with the general government budget?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a couple lines for discussion.
Okay.
The town hall maintenance and repair going up $5,000. I just thought that might be a good line to keep at last year's budget number, since it's the same logic as capital projects. We don't need to do that increase this year, especially when the town hall has had numerous upgrades year after year after year.
Maybe that's because there were very few upgrades before that, but Dave, I'll give you that one. That was mainly the painting, and you and I talked about that. I'll bring that back to the $9,000 figure. But there was a lot of years when there was nothing done to the town hall.
I agree with you, Don. I'm just saying that, in the past several years, there's been a lot done.
Yeah. And I already gave you that one, Dave.
The last one I wanted to bring up is more symbolic than anything, but we talked about people's jobs and their salaries and so on, and like the CEO of my company just announced that he's reducing his salary 20%. I wasn't going to suggest something like that, but I was going to suggest for consideration that maybe the first selectman's salary should be frozen as a sign.
I'll give you that one too. I already thought about that one. I'll give you that one also.
Thanks, Don.
That's pretty good, Dave. 2 wins.
I'm easy tonight, up to a
That
point.
was too easy.
I'm not always that easy, you know that.
All right, any other comments or questions? And since we're making those changes, we're gonna need a vote to change that.
Do a motion,
I'd like
To,
to move that we accept the budget as revised this evening.
second.
So we have a motion by Steve Egbertson and a second by Matt Kelly. And like we did last meeting, I'm just gonna read down the list as I got it off the website. And you can either say yay or nay. So first one would be Matt Kelly.
You're muted, Matt.
Yay, sorry about that.
Steve Egbertson,
Yay.
John Doyle,
Yay.
Dave Moulton,
Yay.
and Sal Tartaglione.
Yay.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Regional 7 budget. Just on April 27th, they're gonna have a virtual hearing on their budget at 7 o'clock. Anybody, I will send out the invitation I got with the link to that if anybody wants to join it. I plan on being online to see what they have to present, but
I'm going to be online also, Rich.
there hasn't been any change to that budget that you're aware of, has there?
Not that I'm aware of.
How will they approve their budget?
By executive order, they will vote on it. Unless something miraculous happens and they can hold a referendum, but right now I think their plan is at a date to be determined, probably after that hearing, they will take a vote of the Board of Education to approve a budget. It's, analogous to the fact that you've been authorized as the Board of Finance with the concurrence of the Board of Selectmen, not on the budget itself, but to designate that you may approve the budget. Or to authorize you to approve the budget.
And I know it wasn't on the agenda, but I guess we can include is the landfill numbers stayed the same?
I haven't seen any numbers from them yet, Rich.
Okay.
I'll check with Debbie Angel on that.
And I would assume they're in the same situation that their board will approve their budget.
Yeah, all the quasi-publics like the fire district and the RRDD will get to approve their budget. Their board will, just like you will at the fire district.
Yep. So the next item would be the revenue sheet, and I think this is probably a good time to talk about the two options that the town has to elect one or both of to help the taxpayers. I know you've got a meeting tomorrow night of the Board of Selectmen to discuss that. Don, were you looking for input from this board, I assume?
Yeah, the reason it's on this agenda, as you and I had discussed, is we talked about it at the last meeting. And I gave you a bunch of data here, which we probably don't want to go through, and Terry's more expert on this than I am. But at the last selectmen meeting, the preference was quite strong. We did not vote on it because I wanted to wait for this meeting. It was to go with just the deferral of the taxes for the 3-month period, or the due date, not the deferral of taxes. We hope people don't wait the full 3 months. The two options were the deferral from to October 1st for the final due date, or a 3% interest rate in lieu of the 18% interest we charge normally by state statute. The 3% reduction is a very confusing order, because what it does is, let's say you have taxes due right now. If you pay them in March, your due, the amount that you owe is reduced to 3%. And that's obviously 0.5% per month. If you don't pay it now, it reverts back to the 18%. And the same thing, if you don't pay your taxes in the 3-month period with the lower interest rate, then it reverts back, and it just gets to be very confusing, and it probably wouldn't gain us much money. So Terry's recommendation was that we go with the deferment, and we have the option of either making it available to people who attest that they have lost more than 20% of their income due to the pandemic, or we can make it available to everybody in the town if we so choose. And Terry's recommendation is that since we will only lose a small amount of money by deferring it for everybody, we should, which would basically be the interest we would gather by putting it in the bank for those few months, that we do the deferment and make it available to everybody in town, which really cleans up a lot of the administrative paperwork. It cleans up the option that people might claim they were damaged, and we deny that assertion, and then they sue us, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, Terry, you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, in talking with some of the other tax collectors, well, number one, if you only limit it to people that have been hurt because of the virus, then it has to be a 20% reduction in their income. They have to submit an application. They have to submit the application by July 1st. So somehow we have to get the word out to everybody. There are property owners in town that live out of state. So it becomes an issue as to how do you notify these people? Do we have to send out a letter to every car owner, every property owner, every personal property owner? I mean, that can be an expense to get this notification out. And OPM has not really been clear to us as to how we would totally do that. And then there would be the application process, which personally I feel would impact me and maybe some other town employees if all of a sudden I have to have all these people coming into the town hall and I have to have a face-to-face meeting with them. I mean, if somebody's infected, they're going to infect me, or possibly could infect me. So there's that issue. There's the issue of the person that never got notified and finds out, partway through July that they could have had this deferral. And, a lot of the big cities have a legal team right at their hands. We don't have that. We have to pay for every legal issue that comes up. So if something did come up, it could be another liability to the town, an extra cost to the town. So there's just a lot that goes into this. And the bottom line is, in August and September, I collect about $6,000 in interest for delinquent payments. If you open it to everybody, yeah, we're not going to get that $6,000. So it's weighing, one against the other. So my recommendation would just be to be fair to everybody, just open it up to everybody. This does not open it up to escrows, which is where we came up with the information before, where we would be getting the approximately $2 million, because that's what I do bring in the first installment of escrow accounts. So that's the only thing that would not be included if we opened it up to everyone.
It also seems like you were putting these people in a terrible position, having to have them come in and, talk about an earnings. It just sounds simple to do it right across the board, like you say.
Yeah, I mean, it's because they would have to come in and they would have to prove to me that they've had a 20% loss in income. And a lot of people feel that that's an invasion of their privacy.
I agree. I agree.
I
think you make a great point, and that sounds like we should go in that direction.
Is this an action by our board or the
Board of
selectmen?
Selectmen, Matt.
Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
We have to vote on it, and then there's a form here that has to be filled out and sent to the OPM, to Martin, the deputy or the undersecretary.
So what's your feeling on it, Don?
I agree with Terry.
Okay, good.
And that was, Nick and Ray Peck and I talked about it at the last meeting, and that was a consensus among us also. But I didn't want to vote on it until I had a chance to get input from the Board of Finance.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and I think that's the best route to take. I think it's the best benefit to our taxpayers and easiest route for us without having to have an additional cost and, a bigger workload.
Sounds good to me too.
Yep, me too.
So we'll do the 3-month deferment for all residents. And I assume the other 2 selectmen will agree to that.
So I guess we're on the revenue sheet. Obviously, we'll make the change with the decrease in the general government budget.
Okay,
Is there any other thing we want to go over on the revenue sheets?
This is the one that you published about a week after the last meeting, Rich.
Yeah, and that's already at the 97% collection rate. That shows a small decrease in the mill rate, and obviously it'll go down a little bit more with the cuts to the general government budget.
I think the $6,700 cut to it might make the minus 0.09 and minus 0.1 at most.
Rich, one thing I thought we were going to do was reduce the previous year's surplus to 100,000 so that we keep the percentage at a good level.
All right, hang on a second. I'm trying to get it up on my screen, but I'm not sure I can. Here we go. So you were talking about what, the previous year surplus?
Right.
Reduce that to 100,000?
Isn't that what we talked about the last meeting? I thought that was where the percentage worked out well.
Well, no, if we do that, then we're going to have almost a 2% increase.
Are you showing? You're not showing your spreadsheet, are you?
No, but
I have it on the screen, Dave.
But that's not.
Yeah, I see your PDF, but it doesn't.
You want to look at the spreadsheet itself?
Yeah, I'd like to see the live changes.
All right, hold on.
Can I share that, Don?
I already did,
Oh, okay.
or I'm about to.
While we're waiting, Terry, quick question. The tax bills will still go out in July, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Wait, that's the PDF, sorry. One more try. Can you see that?
I can see part of it. Oh, now I can.
You can see the spreadsheet though, right?
Yep.
Okay, let me make it a little bit smaller. Maybe you can see the whole thing.
Actually, the numbers are too small now.
Okay, let me see. Okay, we'll try one more time. We may have to do some scrolling then. Is that legible, Dave?
Yep, that's good.
All right, so if you go to the bottom, you're showing a minus 0.09% mill rate. So what you're saying, first we should change the general government budget. It should be 67. All right, so I just dropped the general government budget by the $6,700 for the two line items we discussed. So that gives you minus 0.15% mill rate. And then the other question was $100,000 on surplus.
Yeah, the previous year's surplus, what does that do to the numbers?
That's a 1.7% increase. You doing the same thing on your screen there, Rich?
Yeah.
You want me to unshare and you can share yours?
No, I'm just playing with some numbers right now to just see what it would bring it down to if we brought it down to an even amount for the current mill rate without any changes.
Well, why don't you let me unshare and then you can share yours, as long as you're working on it.
Does mine go up now?
It is there.
Yep, we can see it.
I mean, I just keep changing the number a little bit. I'm not sure where we would need to be, but I don't think it's going to make a significant change in that amount if we wanted to keep the mill rate equal or less to what it is now.
What are you using for state revenue? Where's that?
There's the state revenue.
And those are the numbers I assume that are in the current budgets that were put forth by the governor and the legislature, and who knows what's going to happen when they go to in special session in July.
Yeah, they'll be looking at $1.5 billion deficit for 2 years.
This year it's 500. I thought next year, what, $1.5 billion?
Yeah, $1 billion. Yeah, and they get 2.7 in the rainy day fund. While you're working on those numbers, it's also worth remembering that, and Jim, this is for you and Don really, but there apparently is going to be some as yet undefined relief for towns for expenses they incurred due to the coronavirus, and they'll be recoverable. Now, that's a pretty broad target, and I'm not suggesting that we try to manipulate anything into our budget, but I hope we have a kind of a special side ledger to try to keep track of all that stuff so that anything we can claim, especially if it's a short turnover or time frame, we can do it.
I think on the town side, John, we've spent not tens of dollars, but probably hundreds of dollars at most. I suspect the school has spent more than we have is at the town level, because things are we're just moving right along with what we have. We bought some masks and we bought some other gloves and sanitizing solutions. But if you add that up in total, it's not worth this federal paperwork. I don't know about the school, what you've done, Jim, but
That's one of the issues that I'm negotiating with Leggett, for instance, is that we have to pay the bus drivers tab, but I know that Bruce is applying for federal assistance through the SBA. I need
payroll protection act.
Exactly. I need to work into the agreement with him that, if we're fronting the money for the employee's payroll, if he does in fact get reimbursed from the federal government for those costs, that needs to come back to us in the town. So yeah, those are the little murky places that we need to be careful.
Well, I'm not. The only reason for this comment is just with everything else going on, it's easy to miss this stuff. But Don, I just say be as creative as you can.
Thank you, John.
And if it's
God
anything
knows
like,
enough people have been creative on the Payroll Protection Act, so we certainly have a high standard to meet in terms of creativity.
Well, the problem is a lot of those federal programs are out of money and the state programs are out of money, and depending how much they put back into them. But the reimbursement I think you're talking about, John, is probably through FEMA, and that's a nightmare.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a more general. I think this phase 4 or whatever they're talking about will have relief directly to the towns, and it's probably going to be tied to any expenses we can imagine, if not prove, that have to do with this virus. That's my only comment. I don't want to prolong
The
this.
email I got today said right now it's limited to towns 50,000 and up, and everybody's working
Yeah, but that's
to all communities.
yeah, that's not phase 4 though,
I'm not sure, but
because they haven't passed it. So I know it's not phase 4.
no, but I thought that was what was in the bill that I think they just passed the bill actually, but.
Yeah, but 4 is, well, they did in one house, but 4 is going to be following this.
Okay.
And as I say, this isn't a point of contention or debate. It's just keep a ledger, be creative.
I can tell you from past experience, that's a long, tedious process, and it's quite a while before you see any money. So I'm going to guess it's probably not going to be any better this time.
I'm still waiting on my Payroll Protection Act myself, and I filled one of them out.
Hey, Rich, could you scroll down to the mill rate part?
Yep. Just so you know, right now, I had been playing with the surplus. I think it had it at 290 at this point.
Did you change the little bit there in the general government budget, Rich?
I believe I did. Just a second. Let me check. I know I guess the question at this point is, do we want to try to reduce the mill rate or keep the surplus lower? Or we certainly wouldn't want to go up on the mill rate.
So what do you have for previous years right now?
Right now, we're at 290.
For previous year surplus.
290,000.
And what do you have for collection rate?
97%.
I think that considering what happened with the Board of Ed, I think we're doing really well with what's there now.
Dave, sorry,
what-
Dave, you know how I'm always against using previous year. This may be a year to do it.
Where does that leave our general fund? What percentage of budget?
Well, if we're 1386 right now, assuming we do get some kind of surplus, let's say that goes up by $100,000, 1486. Take 300 out of that, we're down around 1112. As a percentage of the budget, we'll be close to 10%. I can't tell you right now off the top of my head whether it'll be 9.5 or 10.5, but it'll be around 10.
And Rich, that's at 290?
Right now, it was at 290. When we started, it was 300.
How about, I don't know. I guess I'm okay at that, or maybe 250, something.
I can tell you if I go to 250, it's going to increase the mill rate this year. Unless we change something else.
Yeah, I don't think you want to increase the mill rate.
No.
That's why we kind of, I think, wanted to leave it at the 300 so that we could even reduce the mill rate a little bit.
Okay.
That makes
I would
sense.
go with reducing it just that little bit.
Keep it as a 290, or you want to go to the 300 that we had previously? This still reduces it a little.
I like 290, it's below 300.
All right.
Dave, to answer your question, if we get $100,000 in surplus and you do the 290, you're at about 9.2% of the budget for reserve, which is about as low as I would dare to go, especially with the unknown in cash flow.
Well, that shouldn't affect cash flow this year, Don. Because, I mean, the cash it is what we have.
Well, I'm thinking about what we have on July 1st. That's true. You wouldn't allocate this money until you
need it
later in the year, probably. So you're right, Matt. But going below 10% gets a little squeaky.
Well, the good thing is we're not looking to borrow any money, so it won't affect that. But still, I don't want to go too low, just in case something happens. Everybody good with this?
Could you put your cursor on your, for some reason on my calculation, I'm getting 31.3 rather than 30.95. Can you put your cursor on 30.95?
Yep.
You got to click on that cell.
Yeah, I did. Oh, I thought I did.
All right, well, I'll have to check my formula then, because I'm not coming out with the same number, but I'm okay with what you did.
Okay. Do we need to, since we revised this, do we need to have a new motion to send this to the hearing?
Yep, motion to forward the revenue sheet as amended.
Second.
So moved.
So motion by Matt Kelly and second by John Doyle.
Yes.
Okay, we'll do the roll call. Matt Kelly,
Aye, affirmative.
Steve Egbertson,
Aye.
John Doyle,
Aye.
Dave Moulton,
Aye.
Sal Tartaglione.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously also.
Rich, if you send me that, I'll start to put together the presentation for the public hearing.
I'm going to hit the save right now, so I'll send that to you right after the meeting.
If you want to unshare, I'll go back to the package.
All yours.
All right. Okay. The last thing on the agenda, I think.
Well, the next item was just the public hearing, but I think we're all set for that.
Yeah, I sent out the annual report PDF today. We do have hard copies. Nobody's going to pick that up. The plan would be, as we've done in the past, I'll put together a mailer. I'll run it by you, Rich, like we've done the last few years, to talk about the changes in the budget and et cetera, and plan a Zoom public hearing on the 12th, I think was the date you had picked at the last
Yes.
meeting.
Hey, Rich,
Yes,
when the meeting's over, could you send me the Excel file so I can compare your formulas to my formulas?
absolutely. I'll send it to everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
And then the plan would be to have a public hearing on the 12th through Zoom normal presentation formats. Hopefully we can get some members of the public to participate. That will probably be after Regional 7 passes their budget. I think they were talking about having their hearing on the 27th and then a board meeting, I think, on the 11th to vote on the budget.
Now, Donna, the only thing we're doing on this for comments is that virtual meeting on the 12th.
We treat it as a normal budget hearing, I think, to get public input, yeah.
I'm only asking because I've got to do something with the fire district the following night, so we'll probably do the same thing so we're consistent. And yes, anybody's got any questions on that, then we'll move on to the next item, which is the appointment of the auditor for fiscal year 1920.
And what I put up on the screen that was in your package was the letter we got from George Cinnamon 2 years ago with a 3-year quote holding the fee flat at $15,000 a year for, this is the 3rd year of that contract. And based on what I hear from other towns, we're getting a bargain, and I think he does a good job for us. He's very accessible, very reasonable, and he's kept us out of trouble.
Motion to name Cinnamon and Associates as the auditor
Second.
for, who is second?
Second, Dave Moulton.
All right.
And the motion
Hey,
was by
Don,
Yes, Al.
did we ever open that up for RFP?
Yeah, we went back in 2018 at your request.
Good. Okay. I just want to make sure because I know we talked about it. I wasn't sure if it was done. And, George does a great job. I just want to make sure that we're covered and that, every 4 or 5 years you go through the process. At least we have record of it.
Yeah, we would do that next year because we don't have a quote from him, but he gave us a 3-year quote. The only competitor who bid, and we went out, with a normal bid process, was somebody from New York who wasn't even certified as a CPA in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah. And you know what? Again, as long as we have record of it, so we're covered. And, I fully support George, so it's not an issue. I just want to make sure that we go through that motion.
Yeah, we did. We'll do it again next year.
Yeah, we should make a note that we need to do that before this time next year, so we have the quotes back before we have to make the appointment. So, any other discussion?
You don't.
So we've got a motion and second. So we'll do the roll call again. Matt Kelly,
Aye.
Steve Egbertson,
Aye.
John Doyle,
Aye.
Dave Moulton,
Aye.
and Sal Tartaglione.
Aye.
I'm not getting tongue-tied tonight. I'm doing better. Do we have any transfers, Don?
Not at the moment. I don't think we will have any yet. I hope not anyway.
Okay, approval of the minutes.
They're on the screen right now, and I did email them to the board for those who can't see the screen.
I'll move to approve.
For the Board of Finance, just a note of
Second.
clarification, it's Tom Brodnitsky, not Todd Brodnitsky. As far as
My bad. Yeah, I don't know how I
those
did that.
present.
Because I have it Tom today.
Good catch,
Steve, you
Sal.
want to do motion as amended with the typo?
So moved.
All right, I'll second.
All right, so Steve Egbertson motion to approve as amended and seconded by Matt Kelly. Go to the roll call one more time. Matt Kelly,
Affirmative.
Steve Egbertson,
Aye.
John Doyle,
Aye.
Dave Moulton,
Aye.
Sal Tartaglione.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Obviously, I haven't been in the town hall, but I have received no correspondence. Does anybody else have correspondence? Hearing none, the only other item on the agenda is adjournment.
Well, I have one question.
Yep.
Does anybody know why Alicia Kennerson from New Hartford was on our meeting?
Yes. What she told me was that they are getting ready to do something similar. I don't think they've done it before. So she was auditing the course.
You're a trailblazer.
She was auditing? Well, I don't understand.
She was learning from our experience.
Yeah,
Very
that's
thorough,
right.
Sir Don.
They haven't done it before and they're about to, so that she just wanted to see how we ran a meeting.
But why would we want to help them?
Because it's a public meeting. Anybody
I know,
can log on.
I'm just kidding.
I knew that.
All right, do we have a motion and a second to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I'm not gonna do a roll call on this. Everybody in favor, raise their hand.
Aye.
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 Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. And just a reminder, we will be doing the meeting on May 12th. Will be the public hearing. Hopefully we'll get some town taxpayers to join in and we'll get some feedback. So otherwise, thanks everybody for their hard work and we'll talk to you next month.
Great meeting, Rich, Don.
Thank you, Rich.
And I'll send that stuff out.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Rich.
Good night,
Thanks, Don.
everybody.
Good night,
Good night.
everybody. Thanks.
Aye.